Yeah, thanks, first of all, Sebastian, for the invite, and thanks to the team for putting this together. This is a really great event, and I'm very thrilled to be here. My name's Paul Sharratt. I work as a policy and research manager at the Sovereign Tech Agency. I'm not really a tech person. I have a mild background in data science, but mostly work on kind of questions of policy. And the title of my talk today is a little provocative. Is the sound okay? Okay, cool. But I'd like us to think today about what are the things that make up our modern world. And the key questions are who looks after our infrastructure, who looks after the kind of sewage systems beneath our feet, who keeps it running today. And what about the trains and the train tracks we rode to get here, the electricity grid powering everything, and even the roads we walk across. Basically what I'm building towards is, in the end, it's the government, or we as citizens and residents with our taxes. And when we ask these questions about open source software, about those foundational components that underpin our digital world today, and the world's digital infrastructure, the answer is very different, but in some ways the same. To explore this, I want to take a look at the history of public water infrastructure and make some pretty lateral analogies. I hope you'll forgive me. This is all a bit, normative and policy-based, but that's kind of what I'm here for. So a bit of forced audience participation. Who took a shower this morning or had a glass of water from a tap? Okay, cool, well done, great, fantastic, that's out the way. I genuinely think it's one of the kind of marvels of modernity that I can turn on a faucet and clean water comes out that I can drink, cook with, or shower with. But things weren't always this way, and it took a lot of people, a lot of planning, and a lot of money to get to where we are today. If you were in Berlin on New Year's Eve, you would have experienced several districts were without water the entire night, and even some streets in the district of Wedding flooded. That's because a roughly 100-year-old iron pipe broke. Some people speculated that it was due to powerful fireworks in the area, and I'm sure for those of you who have been in Berlin on New Year's Eve, you can probably understand why that might happen. But the water utility company actually confirmed that it was just simple wear and tear. Let's come back to wear and tear later, but for now, can you imagine building something that would last 100 years? I mean, amazing as it sounds, that's kind of what people did back in the day with water infrastructure. Turning to London, where I'm from, it was a city with a growing population reaching over 2.5 million, and it subsisted on an ad hoc system of wells, water pumps, cesspits, over 200,000, and latrine bucket carriers who removed night soil from homes. You might call them proprietary waste removal services. This whole system was reaching its limits, and by that I mean that it literally did often overflow. The rise of indoor plumbing for the wealthy and the middle class led to waste being flushed directly into the waterways and rivers like the Thames. And cholera epidemics spread in the 1830s and in the 1840s. There were plans made to try and address this huge societal-wide problem, but cost was, of course, an issue. But then, in 1858, came the Great Stink. It was a hot and dry summer, so instead of the sewage being carried out to sea, it stayed in the River Thames. And the government of the day authorized a project to build a public sewer system, which civic engineer Joseph Bazalgette led, and which was finished in 1875 for a cost of 6.5 million, which was a lot of money back in those days. Coming over to the city where I live now, Berlin, around the same time, Berlin's population had grown to almost 500,000. Berlin, however, was one of the last European capitals to finally construct a water supply system, starting in 1852, while the sewage system began in 1873, headed by James Hobrecht. I really hope there's like some infrastructure nerds in this audience, because we're really getting into it now. But anyway, Berlin's fresh water system was actually built by an English company, and Berlin Gasworks were also run by a British company. And it's just a sort of interesting tidbit on how infrastructure expertise wasn't confined within national borders. Since then, various government-owned companies have been in charge of Berlin's water and sewage infrastructure, providing almost 4 million residents with clean water and flushing toilets. We talk about the software eating the world. and even open source, eating software even faster. In the 19th century, the culprit was toilets. They were literally putting pressure on a system that was not designed for flushing. There are some interesting parallels here, but it's almost too on the nose, and I'll leave it to you to think about what's putting pressure on open source, although we did here talk about AI earlier. James Hobrecht, the city planner behind Berlin's sewage system, was commemorated on another piece of physical infrastructure, this bridge. But there are other kinds of infrastructure that are interesting. For instance, Hamburg's first elevated railway, which opened in 1912 with the Ringbahn, laying the foundation for the modern U-Bahn network in the city, which I imagine quite a few of you would have used to get here today, right? By the 1920s, key lines were electrified and expanded across the city, and similarly, the port of Hamburg, often called Germany's gateway to the world, began modern container operations in 1968, and it's still one of Europe's largest ports. These types of public infrastructure have grown into an interrelated system of actors. Who built Hamburg's sewage system beneath our feet? Who keeps it running today? Well, it's the government. The same goes for the trains we rode to get here to be at AHOY, and the roads we walk across and the public ferries we use. And I just want to give a shout out to these various organizations that make that possible. But when we ask ourselves these questions about the open source software, the foundational components that underpin our world's digital infrastructure, the answer is very different. It's Daniel for curl, it's Piotr, Christian, and Volkan for Log4j, a small team for Fortran, Sarah for Nominatin's geocoding, Richard at Yocto, and countless other maintainers. This is, of course, vastly oversimplified, as often there are teams behind these teams and these individuals. It's also only a partial snapshot of the vast and complex ecosystem of critical software components that I've run into through working with the Sovereign Tech Agency. So just to stress the point, on the side of physical infrastructure, we have these large organizations and companies, and on the side of our existing digital infrastructure, we have these small teams and individuals, many of whom are volunteers. No talk is complete, of course, without an XKCD comic, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but it's really about digital infrastructure's fragility. In an age and in societies reliant on or eaten by software, in which governments, private companies, organizations, and individuals depend on digital systems, these foundations are terrifyingly precarious. There's so much pressure on the ecosystem from increasing digitalization. So pick your toilet analogy, but whether it's machine learning or every company needing its own app, all of this is additional weight on top of these building blocks and gushes down on individual maintainers, and many projects do only have one maintainer, and consider themselves lucky if they have two. We can hope and work towards having the right organizations and key decision makers recognizing this and paying the right people to do the critical work of caring for and securing these systems, and this is where the Sovereign Tech Agency kind of comes in. Governments are generally quite good at maintenance, so much that we take it all for granted until something goes wrong. Whether it's making sure that medicines are safe, water is clean, or transport is reliable, we generally, and I use that word carefully, can rely on public agencies and institutions to be on the ball, whether it's here in Germany, where I now live, or in the UK, where I grew up. For digital infrastructure, for the open technologies used in everything, we're leaning very hard on the work of the individuals or small groups of volunteers I spoke about before. But just as many countries made the transition from toll roads to public roads, is it possible for governments and nation states to help secure this public digital commons without running roughshod over the sprawling organic ecosystem of FOSS contributors and communities who created it? How do we do this? The ways that you build a sewage system or keep air travel safe are not how you commission software maintenance. Don't need to tell you that. Especially not on the sprawling web of critical open source infrastructure. With thousands of individual maintainers, hobbyists, semi-professionals, and professional contributors, it's messy. How do you even identify the people with the knowledge and experience to keep this work going? Let's stretch this metaphor and imagine it's like wrapping string around these individual strands of a spider web. Beyond that, there's the question of what attention and public money will do to these technologies and communities. It won't be easy, but it's worth it, and increasingly, it's necessary. To do a thing, it's helpful to name it, which is why we're trying to make, and I love this noun, it's fantastic, classic sort of German compound, to make digitale Daseinsvorsorge happen in Germany. It's the notion that in the same way that governments are in charge of providing education, clean water, and transportation in the public interest, so too can they invest and maintain critical and essential open source, which is why I'm so glad to be here today. Without turning this into a pitch, this is what we're working on at the Sovereign Tech Agency. Today, I'm making the case that modern societies should consider open digital infrastructure and services as much their responsibility as physical infrastructure, and I'm also inviting you all, wherever you live or work, to make a shift in your thinking. After all, instead of Berlin and Hamburg's building sewers decades after London, stabilizing and sustaining open source benefits all of us right now together. That's it from me. Thank you very much for listening. Very much up for a chat if you want to come grab me afterwards. Thank you.